Paulie Mancuso thought loyalty would save him. One impulsive move, one missing backup, and in under 10 minutes, his entire criminal future collapsed forever.
Welcome to Failed Gangster.
Revere, Massachusetts, 1978. A place where everyone knew your name, your family, and your business, especially if you were doing something illegal. Paulie No Backup Mancuso wasn't a made guy, and he wasn't a mastermind. He was a local operator who believed reputation mattered more than preparation. For years, he survived on small scores, street respect, and the illusion of protection. But in the criminal world, illusions don't stop consequences. One decision, made under pressure, turned Paulie from a feared name into a cautionary tale. This is the story of how one mistake erased an entire criminal career.
The Setup. Revere, Massachusetts, 1978. Not the kind of place where legends are made, the kind where they quietly fall apart. The streets were narrow, the bars were dim, and everyone knew exactly who you were before you ever opened your mouth. In a town like Revere, reputations traveled faster than police radios, and once your name meant something, it followed you everywhere. That was the world Paulie Mancuso grew up in. He wasn't born into power, he didn't come from money, and he definitely didn't come from anything resembling protection. What Paulie had was confidence, loud, visible, undeniable confidence, and in the late 1970s, that alone could take you surprisingly far. Revere was blue-collar at its core. Dock workers, factory hands, mechanics, bartenders, the kind of town where hard work was respected and shortcuts were quietly admired, as long as you didn't embarrass anyone. Crime existed here, but it wasn't glamorous. No suits, no luxury cars, just favors, pressure, threats, and cash exchanged in envelopes that never stayed clean. Paulie learned early that fear worked faster than friendship. By his mid-20s, he had carved out a small but noticeable presence. Not a boss, not even close, but a guy people recognized. Someone whose name made conversations pause for half a second longer than usual. In neighborhoods like this, that pause meant something. He ran small operations, low-level rackets that flew under the radar, or at least he thought they did. Protection money from local businesses, security services that no one asked for but everyone paid for, the occasional intimidation job when someone needed to be reminded how things worked around here. Paulie didn't work with a crew. That was his thing. Where other guys leaned on numbers, he leaned on reputation. Where others planned exits, Paulie relied on presence. He walked into places alone, spoke calmly, and let silence do the rest. People filled in the gaps themselves, usually with worst-case assumptions. And most of the time, it worked. That's how the nickname started. No Backup. At first, it was a joke. Guys at the bar would say it half laughing, half impressed. Paulie never brought anyone with him, never waited outside, never made calls for support. If something went wrong, he handled it himself, or so it looked. But jokes in the criminal world have a way of turning into labels, and labels, once earned, are almost impossible to shake. Paulie leaned into it. He liked how it sounded, liked how it separated him from the others. No Backup meant fearless, independent, untouchable. It suggested a man so confident in his standing that he didn't need insurance. What Paulie never considered was how thin that illusion really was. Because beneath the swagger, beneath the reputation, Paulie was operating without the one thing that kept people alive in that world: margin for error. Revere wasn't forgiving. Police knew the usual faces. They knew who hung around which bars, who collected from which stores, who talked too much when they drank. There were no anonymous criminals here, just familiar ones.
and Polly was very familiar. Yet somehow he'd avoided serious consequences. No major arrests, no prison time, a few warnings, a few close calls, enough to scare smarter men into changing their habits. Polly saw those moments differently. To him, they were proof. Proof that he could keep skating by. Proof that the rules didn't apply to him the same way they applied to everyone else. Proof that reputation alone was enough to bend reality just a little. By 1978, Polly believed his own myth. The mindset. Confidence is dangerous in the wrong hands. Polly didn't wake up planning to ruin his life. In fact, most days felt routine. Familiar bars, familiar faces, familiar money changing hands. The kind of rhythm that convinces you nothing will ever really change. But small towns have a way of tightening around people like him. Business owners were getting nervous. Police patrols felt closer. Conversations stopped a little faster when Polly entered a room. The respect was still there, but now it carried tension. Others noticed. Some guys pulled back. Some stopped returning calls. A few quietly moved their operations elsewhere. Revere was starting to feel too small, too watched, too risky. Polly noticed all this and dismissed it. In his mind, fear was weakness. Backup was insecurity. Planning was hesitation. He had survived this long by trusting his instincts, and he believed instincts were sharper than caution. That belief was reinforced every time nothing happened. Every time he walked away clean, his confidence hardened. Every avoided arrest felt like a victory. Every close call became evidence that he was doing something right. What Polly never realized is that luck doesn't announce when it's about to run out. Financial pressure started creeping in. Not desperation, not yet, but enough to irritate him. Protection payments weren't coming as easily. Some businesses delayed. Others complained more openly. Polly hated that. Complaints felt like disrespect, and disrespect was something he couldn't tolerate. He also felt something else gnawing at him: stagnation. Polly wasn't moving up. He wasn't earning more. He wasn't gaining territory or influence. Younger guys were starting to talk bigger, act bolder. They traveled in pairs. They planned. They adapted. Polly stayed the same. To him, changing would mean admitting his way wasn't perfect, and that was unacceptable. When an opportunity finally appeared, the kind that promised fast money with minimal effort, it hit all the wrong buttons at once: ego, pressure, pride, the need to prove something, not just to others, but to himself. Other guys hesitated. They saw risks, variables, things that could go wrong. Polly saw hesitation as cowardice. He told himself the job was simple, clean, quick. He'd done harder things alone. He'd handled worse situations without blinking. Why would this be different? There was no backup planned, no lookout, no partner, no fallback. Because backup, in Polly's mind, was for people who expected to fail. And Polly didn't expect failure, not even as a possibility. What he didn't understand is that the decision had already been made, long before the job itself. It was made every time he chose ego over preparation, every time he ignored warning signs, every time he mistook luck for skill. By the time he stepped forward, confident and alone, the outcome was already set in motion. He just didn't know it yet.
The terrible decision. The opportunity didn't arrive dramatically. No mysterious phone call, no secret meeting in a back room, just a conversation that drifted into something more dangerous than it sounded. The kind of thing that feels casual until it isn't. Polly Mancuso heard about it in passing, over drinks, the way bad ideas usually enter the world. Someone mentioned a problem, someone else mentioned money, and before long, the pieces were laid out on the table without anyone formally asking him to pick them up.
There was a small operation running out of Revere that had started pushing its luck. Not outsiders, locals, familiar faces who thought they'd grown bold enough to stop paying what they owed. They had cash moving through one location, late hours, predictable patterns. Too predictable. The job wasn't supposed to be violent. That was the selling point. Just pressure, a reminder, a short visit that would reset expectations. Other guys listened and shook their heads. Too exposed, too many witnesses, too many ways for it to go sideways. Someone suggested waiting. Someone suggested bringing a second person. Someone else mentioned police attention in the area. Paulie heard all of that and internally rejected every word. He saw something else entirely, a chance to reassert himself. For months, he'd felt the shift, the subtle erosion of fear, the hesitation in people's voices, the way his name didn't quite carry the same weight it once did. This was a chance to fix that, to remind everyone exactly who they were dealing with, and more importantly, to remind himself. Paulie spoke calmly when he finally chimed in. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He simply said he'd handle it. Alone. There was an awkward pause after that, the kind where no one directly challenges you, but everyone silently disagrees. One guy tried again, gently, suggesting a lookout, just in case. Paulie shut it down immediately. No backup, he said, half smiling. That should have been the moment someone walked away, but in that world, bravado often overrides judgment. No one wanted to be the one to call him reckless to his face, so the plan became unofficially official. Paulie didn't prepare the way most criminals do. No rehearsals, no alternate routes, no timing adjustments. He relied on memory and confidence. He knew the streets. He knew the faces. He knew how people reacted when he showed up unannounced. That had always been enough before. The night he chose was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of calm that should make you suspicious, but rarely does when you're convinced nothing can touch you. He dressed normally, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. He looked like a man heading out for a drink, not someone about to gamble his future. As he walked, he replayed past successes in his head. Times he'd stood his ground, times people backed down, times fear did the work for him. What he didn't replay were the close calls, the almost arrests, the warnings, the moments when things could have gone differently. Those didn't fit the story he told himself. When Paulie arrived, the location looked exactly as expected. Lights on, business moving, a couple of people inside, nothing alarming at first glance. He stepped in without hesitation. That was mistake number one. Inside, the air felt off. Conversations didn't stop, but they slowed. Eyes lingered just a bit longer than they should. Paulie noticed, but interpreted it as nerves. He believed his presence alone was doing its job. He made his way forward, speaking quietly, directly. No threats, no shouting, just a calm reminder of obligations. At first, it worked. Then someone asked a question Paulie hadn't anticipated. It wasn't aggressive, it wasn't loud, but it shifted the balance. Suddenly, Paulie wasn't controlling the room. He was reacting to it. He answered, but the moment had changed. Confidence met resistance. That was mistake number two, staying. He could have walked out, could have reset, could have returned with support, but backing down wasn't in his vocabulary. Leaving would have felt like weakness, and Paulie Mancuso did not do weakness. What happened next unfolded fast, faster than stories make it sound. A misunderstanding, raised voices, someone stepping closer than they should have. The situation tilted from controlled to unstable in seconds. Someone outside noticed the tension, someone inside panicked, and someone, somewhere, made a call. Paulie didn't know that yet. He was too focused on salvaging control, on forcing the moment back into his favor. He leaned harder instead of stepping back. He doubled down on presence instead of reassessing reality. That was mistake number 3. When law enforcement finally entered the equation, it wasn't dramatic. No sirens at first, no warning, just the sudden awareness that time had run out. Paulie realized too late that he had nowhere to go. No lookout to warn him, no partner to distract, no exit planned beyond the front door he'd already used. When officers stepped in, the shift was immediate. Authority replaced tension. Fear replaced confidence, and Paulie's reputation, the thing he'd relied on for years, meant absolutely nothing. He froze, not because he was weak, but because his brain was scrambling for options that didn't exist. Every escape route was theoretical. Every contingency was imaginary. He had built his entire approach on the idea that things wouldn't go wrong. Now they had. He was detained quickly, calmly, efficiently. No struggle, no theatrics, just a reality snapping into place with brutal clarity. As he was let out, faces watched him, not with fear, but with distance. The same people who once lowered their eyes now stared openly. The myth had cracked. Paulie No Backup Mancuso didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The moment spoke for him. The decision he made that night didn't just go wrong. It exposed every weakness he'd been hiding behind confidence. And as the door closed behind him, one truth became unavoidable. His criminal career didn't end because of bad luck. It ended because he never planned for failure.
The collapse. The holding room was quiet. Not the dramatic kind of silence you see in movies, just a dull, fluorescent stillness that gives you too much time to think. Paulie Mancuso sat alone, hands resting on his knees, staring at a scuffed tile floor that suddenly felt very permanent. This was the part he had never imagined. Not because he thought he was invincible, but because he never allowed himself to imagine losing. For years, his world had been built on movement, on walking in and out of places, on controlling when conversations started and ended. Now, everything stopped. Officers didn't rush. They didn't threaten. They didn't need to. The situation was clean, documented, and witnessed. Statements came quickly. Names were volunteered. Details filled in gaps Paulie didn't even know existed. In a town like Revere, no one wanted trouble, but once it arrived, no one wanted to protect it either. The evidence stacked up fast. Witnesses placed Paulie at the scene. Business owners confirmed past interactions. Records painted a clear pattern of intimidation. Nothing he'd done alone stayed isolated. Every small action connected to something larger once law enforcement started pulling threads. And Paulie had no one to slow the process down. No phone calls from someone important. No favors called in. No lawyer arriving early because someone else made it happen. Just procedure. When word spread, it moved faster than the paperwork. By the next morning, everyone knew. The bars, the shops, the corners where deals were whispered. Paulie No Backup Mancuso had been picked up, and this time it wasn't a rumor. People reacted the way they always do when power collapses. They distanced themselves. Men who once laughed with him suddenly couldn't remember the last time they'd spoken. Business owners stopped returning calls. Associates disappeared into silence. Nobody wanted to be connected to a sinking ship. Paulie watched it happen from the inside, helpless. The nickname that once sounded fearless now sounded foolish. No backup didn't mean brave anymore. It meant alone. In court, there was no drama, no grand speeches, no surprise twists. Just a man with a paper-thin defense standing in front of a system that had finally caught up to him. The charges stuck. Not because they were extreme, but because they were undeniable. The judge didn't lecture. He didn't need to.
The sentence reflected something colder than anger, finality, a clear message that this chapter of Paulie's life was over. As he was led away, there were no looks of respect, no nods, no acknowledgement, just another case closed in a town that had seen plenty before and would see plenty after. Paulie Mancuso didn't leave court defeated. He left irrelevant.
Aftermath and legacy. Time moves differently after a fall. For Paulie, the days stretched longer, quieter. The adrenaline was gone. The routines that once defined him vanished. No territory, no income, no influence, just reflection and regret that arrived too late to be useful. Outside, Revere adjusted almost immediately. Another guy stepped into the vacuum, someone younger, someone hungrier, someone who watched what happened to Paulie and told himself it would never happen to him. That's how cycles survive. Paulie's name still came up, but only as a reference point. Don't do it like Paulie. Remember what happened to No Backup. His story became a warning, stripped of glamour and reduced to a lesson. Not because he was the worst, but because his mistake was so simple. He believed confidence could replace preparation. Years later, people remembered him less as a threat and more as a mistake frozen in time, a man who mistook momentum for immunity, who thought standing alone made him strong. But the truth was simpler. Paulie didn't fail because he lacked intelligence. He didn't fail because he lacked courage. He failed because he refused to accept that things can go wrong. In the criminal world, careers don't usually end with explosions or betrayals. Most end quietly, with paperwork, closed doors, and people pretending they never knew you. Paulie Mancuso's story isn't about ambition or greed. It's about one terrible decision made by a man who stopped believing he needed a safety net. Because in crime, confidence without preparation isn't strength. It's a countdown.
Paulie Mancuso didn't lose because he was careless forever. He lost because he was careless once. In the underworld, you don't get reminders, only consequences. No backup meant no escape, no second chances, and no future in the life he chased. Revere moved on. New names replaced his. New mistakes were made by new people. Paulie faded into local memory, remembered only as the guy who thought he was untouchable. In the end, his nickname wasn't street branding. It was a warning. In crime, confidence without preparation isn't courage, it's a countdown.